And I'm also really privileged to be, I've recently taken up the position of the president of the Southwest area of the Institute of Water. I've taken over from Mark Woolsfold, who's recently retired from Southwest Water. Mark was a director there. And so firstly, I would like to say thank you very much to Mark for his service to the Institute over many, many years, and obviously more recently as the area president. I think Mark is in the audience today, so welcome, Mark. And as I say, it's an honour and a privilege to pick up that role now on behalf of the Institute in the Southwest region. And one of the things I'd like to do during my term as the area president is to develop stronger links between the research and innovation base in the Southwest, and particularly the universities and research institutions and organizations, and the supply chain and the end users on a regional basis. And within that sort of development of research and innovation pipelines, also to see what we can do to support early career colleagues, young water professionals, again on a regional basis. If you're not speaking, I'd appreciate it, folks, please, if you could turn off your microphones. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is the first webinar in the series of events that we're running in the Southwest. There are a number of things under plan which you will hear about very, very shortly. Before I get into introducing our speaker, I just wanted to share a few slides in relation to the Institute of Water. And this is really for the benefit of trial members or non-members. A little bit of PR here, just to show you what the opportunities are within the Institute. It is very much a family of water professionals. It's effectively the only institute which is solely geared towards colleagues who are working in the water sector. And it offers a range of opportunities from events, mentoring, some publications, and also routes to professional registration. Again, these slides we will share because we've got your email addresses, and we can share the slides afterwards. But the Institute is here to support members, as I say, in terms of professional registration or networking or mentoring, and to join up people who are working in different facets of the water sector in the Southwest region for the benefit of everybody, the environment and society, and our broader water environment. There's a whole series of events. Some are regional, some are organized, on a national basis. Conferences, seminars, webinars, I won't read the list. Social events and awards, etc., dinners. So there's a wide range of opportunity for different ways to engage with your fellow colleagues in the water sector and with the Institute. There are routes to professional registration. In other words, getting your experience recognized in some way from the point of view of professional competence. There's a little more detail coming in the next slide, but professional registration is clearly an important component on the journey towards developing a career. It's peer recognition, and it's an independent recognition of your competence as a successful independent colleague in the water sector. And I'll simply mention here that within that, there's registration through the Engineering Council or the Science Council or the Society for the Environment. And across those, there are chartered status in terms of graduates, incorporated and registered, incorporated engineer, registered scientist, registered practitioner in the environment, and indeed recognition of engineering and environmental and science technician grades. So very much an opportunity to be mentored on the journey to becoming professionally qualified and recognized in these areas. And I've mentioned mentoring. This is something, again, that I would like to develop more of across the region, that where we can perhaps develop a group of mid-career, senior career colleagues who are prepared to mentor early career colleagues. And they don't have to be in the same company or in the same institution, because I think that's also interesting. But to try and develop a network of opportunity for mentoring across the region as part of one of my ambitions during my term as the area president. There's professional CPD, continuous professional development. So some of our events are given scoring points in relation to professional development. You can accumulate those on the journey to professionally registered status. There is a quarterly magazine, which is a mixture of news, information, stories, hot topics, etc., 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 in relation to the water industry. There are some awards, there are some national awards, and we have a regional award which we're about to relaunch called the Pride of the Southwest, which is recognising someone who's made an outstanding contribution to water, the environment, the public, and the water sector in the Southwest. There are networks, so there is a young persons network or an early career colleagues network or a young water professionals network. There's lots of descriptors there. And there's a women's network with a view to supporting female colleagues in the water sector and growing towards hopefully equality and strong considerations of equity, diversity and inclusion, but particularly obviously trying to grow the proportion of female colleagues and support them within the water sector. We have a Rising Stars program. Each region has its own Rising Star, and this, if you like, is a fast track mentoring stroke leadership opportunity, which is has a recruitment once a year. Again, if you're an early career colleague, that's something I would strongly suggest that you have a look at. And it runs, through the year. So the new Rising Stars started at the beginning of January. We'll be recruiting again around October for the next cycle. So there's membership, events, professional registration, as I've just said, and we'll share these slides. The links are live. And if you want a quick access to the website of the institution, then you can scan the code on the screen at the moment. Again, particularly perhaps for those who are joining us as trial members or as guests, visitors. Again, the website will give you a lot more information. The last thing I wanted to say was, before I introduce our speaker, who I'm sure is patiently waiting, is just to introduce the International Water Association World Water Congress and Exhibition 2026. And we have the unique opportunity that we're hosting that in the UK in October in Glasgow. It was in Toronto 2 years ago in 2024, and we're hosting it in Glasgow in early October in this year in 2026. I have the privilege of having been on the programme committee for Toronto, and I'm again on the programme committee for Glasgow. And in fact, our speaker, Matt Wheeldon, is involved too. And we're expecting around 10,000 people. So this is the major global water congress every 2 years. And there is heavy involvement from the Institute of Water, who are hosts of the IWA UK committee. And I would raise this for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's a unique opportunity to have this in the UK. It's probably once in a lifetime experience and opportunity. Secondly, there are a number of events that we're running as a UK organising group. There is a major global summit, invitation only, of very senior people in the water space around the world. And that is aiming to send really clear, strong messaging to the UN Water Congress in December. There are UK thematic forums, and Matt is involved with one of those. We have a UK pavilion showcasing the best of UK technology, innovation and water sector passion. There are cultural events, etc., etc. So again, the QR code here you can scan to get access to the Congress. We will share the slides. And in particular, if you're an early career colleague, then we're looking for volunteers to help run the Congress and join an activity called the World Water Camp, which is set up for early career colleagues to meet each other across the UK. but absolutely internationally. There were over 100 nations represented in Toronto, and we're expecting more than that in Glasgow. So please keep the Glasgow Congress in October this year on your radar. It is an extraordinary opportunity to host this in the UK and show off what the UK can do in the research and innovation and delivery of water utility services in the UK. So let's show them what we've got, and I really look forward to seeing you at that event. Registration should be open, by the way, towards the end of March. Okay, enough from me. Thank you for putting up with that. It is a tremendous pleasure to introduce Matt Wheeldon. I've known Matt for quite some time. Wessex Water are our neighbours just up the road here on the hills outside of Bath in Claverton. Matt is a Director of Infrastructure Development for Wessex Water. And he's had, I don't think he'll mind me saying, he's had about 30 years experience, over 30 years experience in the water sector in the UK. And he's a chartered civil engineer, as you might expect. And Matt's been heavily involved with considering storm overflows and what we do with rain and the challenges of combined drainage and sewerage, and what, why that's probably rather a bad idea. He's been involved with the government Storm Overflow Taskforce and led a review to think about how legislation and regulation should be driven forwards to try and mitigate the challenges of combined sewer CSO spills. And I don't need to set this up, but he will come across, I am sure, as an extremely passionate proponent of alternative ways of managing rain better where it lands. And he's going to share with us his thoughts about why and how we should do that. So I will stop sharing my screen, and with great pleasure, Matt, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Good afternoon.
Oh, sorry, very, very quickly, I beg your pardon. If you have questions as we go along, I beg your pardon, Matt. Please, could you put your questions into the Q&A rather than into the chat? We will deal with them at the end, but please put them there. You can vote for them in the Q&A and we'll pick them up at the end. So Matt, apologies, please, over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. Really excited to share some thoughts with you. It's not going to be complicated. You'll probably conclude that this is common sense. That's what I've concluded. But someone has to say this because, as alluded to in the quote in that previous slide, I think we're making some pretty bad decisions as a nation. So, as Tom said, I've worked for Wessex Water for pretty much all my working career, 27 of my sort of 31 years in water and wastewater. I'm passionate about the environment. I'm a passionate wild swimmer. I absolutely hate wet wipes. And I just love my job. And I'm going to share some thoughts about why we need to manage rain better where it lands. So let me first of all give you some context of what is going on, because the externalities that we are facing are crucial. Our weather patterns are changing. Our summers are getting warmer. They're not getting wetter, but they are getting wilder. As the air temperature rises, we experience something called the Clausius-Clapeyron relationship. So that is the relationship between the temperature of the atmosphere and how much moisture it holds. And what we see in the summers is we're getting longer, drier summers interspersed with wilder thunderstorms. We're seeing in the winters, they're getting warmer as well, and they are getting considerably wetter. And we have just experienced one of the wettest starts in the southwest ever to a year. And when you look at the winters and the summers together and look at the whole year, what we notice is a warming climate and a wetting climate. Now, at every 1 degree the atmosphere gets warmer, it can hold between 6 and 7% more moisture. And that's exactly what we have seen in the records. Between 1960 and 1990, which is one epoch, and 1990 and 2020, which is another epoch, air temperature rose by 0.8 degrees and average rainfall increased by 7.3%. So we can actually see this law of thermodynamics coming to fruition. And we are going faster in that direction. And when you look at the stats in front of you that are from the Met Office, it is getting quite alarming. I just want you to notice on this graph the little red box on the right-hand side, because that's going to appear again in 2 slides' time. So that is one major externality. It's getting warmer, it's getting wetter, it's getting wilder. Another externality is the need for the nation to build more homes. And the government has set this target of 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years. I doubt it will achieve it when you look at historically how many we've been building each year. But every home hopefully will be impermeable, i.e. the roof won't let the rain in, but then that rain that would have landed on grass or on mud or somewhere else has to go somewhere else. And we are dealing with quite considerable increases in impermeable area. So where that rain goes needs to be managed. Right, water companies in England, we have a job of providing drinking water and taking away wastewater. And the wastewater is a combination of sewage and often rain. How much water do we deliver each year? Well, 4,620 gigalitres went to our customers last year. But how much wastewater did we take? Well, the answer is considerably more. And that delta between those 2 numbers is due to rain. When you look at the ratio of how much water we supply compared to how much water we treat, then we treat between 50 and 80% more water than we supply to our customers. So our collection business is considerably larger, and that delta is due to rain. And when you look at the shape of this graph in front of you, which is the ratio of water delivered to wastewater treated, is exactly the same shape as the amount of annual rainfall that I showed 2 slides earlier. In other words, the more it rains, the more wastewater we get. And that is because we have a legacy of a combined sewerage system. Up until the mid-1960s, homes were built with one drainage pipe, which took their roof and it took their sewage as well. We've only separated out rain from sewage since the 1960s, but about half of the properties in England were built before the mid-1960s. So we've got this huge legacy problem that needs to be dealt with. Because of the infrastructure that our nation has, we supply high quality drinking water to all of our customers for every single purpose imaginable. And not all of those purposes need drinking water. So for instance, every time you flush your toilet, which I'm sure you've done today, you will probably have done it with drinking water. Now that drinking water is very, very high standard. It's one of the highest standards in the world. We are heavily regulated on drinking water standards, and yet we are still watering our roses and filling our toilets with this high quality drinking water. This accounts for about 25 to 30% of our daily consumption. We are using drinking water for non-drinking purposes. And I put in a little picture there of a toilet with a transparent system, because I think it really reinforces the craziness of our infrastructure that means that we are filling our toilets with drinking water. On the wastewater side, I've already mentioned we are treating an awful lot of rain, and that ranges between 50 and 80% of the amount of water we supply each year. So basically what I'm saying is all this drinking water and a lot of this rainwater, we are needlessly shifting around our country. And what this graph does not show is how much energy is going into this. Let me give you an example from Wessex Water's perspective. Our average pumping head to the tap is 130 metres. That means every litre that every one of our customers use has been, in effect, lifted 18 kilometres in the air. That's how much energy we put in, because people use 138 litres per person per day. We lift each litre 130 metres. That's the equivalent of us lifting a 1 kilogram weight 18 kilometres in the air per person per day. And about a quarter to a third of that is complete waste of energy. How do we tackle this? That's really what I want to talk about. Now, in the summer, especially last summer, big drought, but we don't actually live in a dry country. We're using less than 2% of the rain that lands on us to give our customers. We have a very inefficient way of capturing rain. Why? Because we rely on just a few individual organizations to do it, water companies, but it's landing on all of us. But all of us don't collect the rain because we're not set up to do that. So we are running out of water because so few organizations are bothering to collect it in times of plenty to use in times of scarcity. Oh, well, that's the water company's responsibility, isn't it? Is it? Let's move on. Such as the changing climate, such as the need to reduce abstractions, that the National Water Resources Management Plans are forecasting that by 2050, we're going to be 5,000 megalitres a day short of how much water we need. And to put that into context, at the moment, daily water supplied is about 12,500 megalitres. Okay, so how are we going to address this shortfall with this changing climate? Well, the Water Resources Management Plans kind of divide it into supply management and demand management. Supply management means you find new water. Demand management means you reduce how much water you use. If you're thinking reservoirs are going to solve the problem, they're not. This is what they're going to solve. They're going to solve about 1/5 of the problem. So all these big reservoirs that everyone's promising to build, it's going to tackle about 1/5 of that deficit. The government is going to be introducing water efficiency labelling, very akin to energy efficiency labelling. That's not going to tackle all the problem either. And to put it into context, if we had different infrastructure, which meant we were capturing the rain and reusing it at our properties, we could reduce our demand per day by about 3,000 megalitres a day. But we don't do that because we've got the wrong infrastructure. So whilst water companies are busy trying to solve water scarcity issues and too much water, storm overflows and flooding, we generally tackle the problem miles away from where the problem is. So the problem is the home. The problem is our homes are not designed to flush toilets with the rain that's landing on them, and our homes historically have been designed to add the rain to the sewage. So what do water companies do? They go and try and fix these problems miles away from where the problem is, because that's the assets that they're in control of. So we build bigger reservoirs and we build big storage tanks. And consequently, we end up storing more water, treating more water, and moving more water to the homes, and then moving more water, rainwater, contaminated with sewage, storing it, and then treating it at treatment works. What we're not considering is the enormous energy and carbon footprint that goes into tackling the problems miles away from where the problems are. We're stuck in this vicious circle. We've got a rapidly changing climate. I've just shown you the slides. We're building more impermeable areas. I've just shown you that slide. We're solving the solution with centralized solutions, solving the problem with centralized solutions, i.e. A few big grey things miles away from where the problem is. And these in turn are exacerbating the problem because of their high embodied carbon. Most of them are concrete, their high operational carbon, they're big energy users. And that of course contributes to a rapidly changing climate. So we're stuck in this vicious doom circle that we are making worse as we try and fix problems in silos. How do we break this circle? How do we address water scarcity and storm overflows without the carbon footprint associated with centralized solutions? Well, I would put it to you that these 6 words, managing rain better where it lands, are key to unlocking a sustainable future when it comes to the quantity of water and how we use it. And managing rain better where it lands, which is the title of this talk, are 6 key words that are now penetrating to the thought leaders in this country. In fact, it was 2 weeks ago that the Water Minister, Emma Hardy, was actually quoted in Parliament using these words. We need to manage rain better where it lands. So I'm absolutely delighted that people are understanding that the problems can be solved in a far better way than the way we're currently solving these problems. And this is because this is back to nature. Back to nature principles, which is again not rocket science. Rain is a resource. How often do people undervalue this wonderful thing that lands on our roofs, and there's plenty of it. Enough rain lands on the average roof each year to supply that property's non-potable demands for flushing its toilet and watering its garden. And yet we continue to do it with drinking water because we're not capturing it locally and using it. And then on the drainage side, we are not returning it back to the environment as close as possible to where it first landed. We generally rely on someone else to take it away from us. And if you live in a home pre-1960s, you're probably expecting the water company to take it away with the sewage in the same pipe. So these two simple principles, which I call simples, after our meerkat friend Alexander, are what underlie those 6 words of managing rain better where it lands. 2 simple principles. Over the next 25 years, water companies are spending about £56 billion trying to address storm overflows. And the way in which they're trying to address them mostly revolve around solution number 2, which means you store the rain when it's raining, it's contaminated with sewage, and then you pump it to the sewage works, and then you treat it. There are 4 general different ways of solving these, attenuation being one. Those first 3, separation, attenuation, and treatment, all reduce the number of storm overflow discharges. Treatment at the overflow, which is option number 4, reduces the harm or improves the quality of the water. But when you compare these 4 different types of solutions, what you see is that one type of solution stands head and shoulders above the others when it comes to comparative benefits. And that is tackling the problem at source, managing the rain where it lands, separating that rain from roofs. If you do that at individual property level, not only do you have a lower embodied and operational carbon footprint because we're not adding the rain to the sewage and then having to deal with that problem, but also it opens up the doors to say, hey, this rain is a valuable resource. Let's use it. And so at the moment, our programs are dominated by solution 2, attenuation. And that is because the way in which the government and the regulators want to tackle storm overflows is all about regulatory certainty of spill numbers. And the only way to achieve that certainty in the timescales we've got is by building solutions that are proven and that are on the water company's assets, which are very short term in their mindset. Because then forever and a day, you're storing this contaminated rain, you're pumping this contaminated rain, and you're treating this contaminated rain rather than tackling the rain. And one of the big drivers of this, of course, is our politicians and the media who are constantly talking about storm overflows as being a sewage problem, when it is not a sewage problem, it is a rain problem. That water efficiency tick on the screen in front of you for separation, you also see that when you look at the other side of water, and that is how can we use other sources of water, i.e. not drinking water, for our needs. And so this, which comes from a report called Reusing Water for Non-Potable Purposes, yet again puts rainwater from roofs at the top of the options available for using non-potable water for non-potable purposes. So you've got rainwater from our roofs as the best option for tackling with storm overflows long term, but also the best option for reducing how much water we consume in the homes and in businesses. What we're trying to do basically is flatten peaks. We're trying to flatten peaks in the summer water demand. There's our water into supply graph at Wessex Water, and as you can see, summer demand is higher than winter demand. And then on the drainage side, we're trying to flatten the peaks when it rains, which obviously affects how much flow goes down the sewers and causes storm overflows. What a decentralized approach of managing rain better where it lands does, it flattens the peaks. It doesn't necessarily solve all the problems, but it goes a long way, and it reduces the amount of infrastructure you need, because infrastructure has to be designed for peaks. If you can flatten the peaks, you don't need such big infrastructure. Right, let's move on to how we're going to achieve this. There isn't a single silver bullet to this. What we need as a nation is a joined up strategy that looks holistically at how we manage rain. And that covers how we legislate, how we regulate, what the economic incentives are, the level of education that people have, which is pretty minimal on this topic, and then the technical guidance in order to help us to actually do that. What we need is to have a strategy that's driven by those two simple principles that I showed earlier and that common narrative of managing rain better where it lands. We're going to have a really quick look. These are quite detailed topics, so we're not going to have time to look at them all, but a really quick look at those 5 areas. So 1, you've got your principles on the left-hand side. You've either got properties you haven't built or you've got properties that have been built. How do we tackle legislation? Well, the biggest win from a reducing water consumption point of view is to start mandating rainwater harvesting, like they do in other countries that are either more progressive in their thinking or more progressive down the climate change route. So a country that would be more progressive down the climate change route would be somewhere like Australia, where their climate is far more extreme than ours, which is where ours will be in the future. And then you've got other more progressive countries in Europe, like Belgium, Spain, Germany, Denmark, Netherlands, where they're just more progressive in their policy approaches, and they value the rain that lands everywhere higher. So we could change building regs to mandate that. On the drainage side, we could put in place the need for sustainable drainage at each property and each new development. This is not new. This has been in law since 2010, but never enacted. Schedule 3 of the Floods and Water Management Act, you might be familiar with that. And there are other tweaks we can do to try and manage this problem. For instance, we could remove a developer's right to add rain to a combined sewer and make it totally conditional on him going through quite a high bar of standard before he's allowed to add rain to a combined sewer. At the moment, the bar is pretty low. The existing housing stock is more difficult. When you look at what law needs to change to retrofit using locally captured rain for flushing toilets and watering gardens, there's less of a space here for water companies, I feel, because redoing people's internal plumbing work is quite disruptive and expensive. So I don't really think there's a huge amount for legislation to do here. Although if you're looking at communal systems, then the Section 68 of the Water Industry Act could be changed to enable water companies to provide non-potable water. We're not allowed to provide non-potable water at the moment, only potable water. Now, the bigger win is to enable water companies to invest in private properties and manage their drainage better by disconnecting the rain from the combined sewer system. At the moment, we don't have powers to go and affect private assets and build private solutions. So I can't come to your home and say, I'm going to disconnect your downpipes and build you a soakaway in your garden. That is not allowed. And what we're trying to do, or what I'm doing with DEFRA, is trying to give us more powers to be more proactive in this space so we don't end up building big storage tanks. I'm going to crack on just because of time. Those 2 shaded areas are the areas where better legislation can have the biggest bang for your buck in terms of managing rain better where it lands. The reason the right-hand box strays into the capturing rain locally for reuse, because when a water company would come in and build a soakaway for you, it could also put some outside storage for that garden, so water butts and things like that. So there will be some benefit, but not a huge amount. Okay, better storm overflow regulation needed. This is dire at the moment. Currently, our regulator regulates on spills. The purpose of storm overflows is to prevent flooding whilst protecting the environment. And really, we should be in a world where regulators regulate the outcome. The outcome is environmental protection, and they should be regulating on environmental outcome. And we've got great opportunity to do that because of the amount of environmental monitoring now going on and to be built on over the next 7-8 years. But our regulator is wedded to spills because it's easy and because that's what government has said. So I think a far better way would be to measure and regulate the environmental impact whilst also measuring spills, but also, importantly, measuring how we are tackling spills. Because how, if we just ignore that and just carry on building storm tanks, we're really not focusing on the environmental impact of these terrible solutions. So actually measuring square meters of impermeable area moved and cubic meters captured for reuse would be a really great input measure, so that there is focus and incentivization to build separation at source solutions rather than these kind of end of pipe solutions. Economic incentives, they exist for energy. The reason your gas and electricity standing charge is so high is because a lot of that is contributed, goes into a central pot that people can then draw down on to get grants to put in solar panels, ground source heat pumps, etc., etc. That is driven by the National Planning Policy Framework, and it recognises the need to decentralise energy systems, but it doesn't mention rain. There is nothing in the current National Planning Policy Framework that recognises that rain is a natural resource that lands on your roof. Whilst it has an overarching environment objective to use natural resources prudently, it doesn't mention rain. How daft, how backward is that? What we could do is have a grant system that does exactly the same as we do in energy, and recognise that the capital cost of doing this work yourself does not pay back quickly. I've done it on my property. In 128 years' time, I will be quids in. Okay, it doesn't make sense. But if I had a grant to do it, I could be quids in straight away. So there is some good news coming on this space in a later slide. Education, education, education. The world is obsessed with using sewage in its headlines. Sewage is like sex. It sells. People click on it. And the media love that. They love clicks. They love clickbait. And what we're not shouting about enough is the carbon footprint of the solution, the way in which we are solving storm overflows, recognizing they are a huge emotional problem for people, less of an environmental problem, I have to say, when you look at the actual data. But what we're not shouting about enough is how we're solving these problems. And these storm tanks are not good long-term solutions. We need to all embrace a common headline narrative, and that's where managing rain better where it lands comes in. We've got those two simple principles. We've got to get emotional. We've got to get passionate about it. Okay, so emotion is really important to drive a message and get change. And we've got to show people what's getting in the way of these right solutions, because tackling storm overflows, thinking it's a sewage problem, is going to drive the wrong solutions. Seeing it as a rainwater management problem will drive better solutions. Okay, signs of change, some good news. This was the Water Minister a couple of weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, there quoted in Parliament, which is absolutely wonderful. She's now talking about rainwater management. She's recognising rain as a resource, and then it's a waste after it's a resource. Good news, we're getting through. DEFRA are on board. They recognise this. The new SUDS hierarchy published last July has got a new hierarchy for what you do with rain. The new number one is you collect it for non-potable reuse. That didn't exist before July last year. Okay, so this is no longer a national standard for SUDS. This is a national standard for rainwater management. So that's great. And then you go down the SUDS hierarchy of where does rain go from a new development, and combined sewer is well and truly at the bottom of that list. So that's great. Good progress. There's the problem, non-statutory guidance. It needs to be in law so that people have to do it rather than can choose to do it. I talked about the National Planning Policy Framework, currently undergoing big consultation, and MHCLG, Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, which kind of oversees the National Planning Policy Framework, is recognising rain in its planning policy framework for the first time. So that's good news too. The other good news is a lot of organisations are embracing this narrative of managing rain better where it lands. There's two examples there in front of you, British Water and a project called Enabling Water Smart Communities, which is an Ofwat Innovation funded project that Anglian Water are leading on, and SciWem. So yeah, Institute of Water, let's hear you talking about managing rain better where it lands, because that consistent narrative is getting through and we need more people to shout about it. The Rainwater Management Platform, this is a project that's taking the Serious Suds Manual, which is the Bible of technical guidance, and it's converting it from a 1,000-page online PDF that's 10 years out of date and you've got to pay for into an online free-to-use web-based platform that helps everyone from property owners through to water companies to manage rain better where it lands. Gathering evidence of why this is a good thing is something that we're currently doing through UK water industry research. I sit on the board for Acquia, and we've managed to get money from DEFRA to answer this question in front of you. What is the evidence that managing rain better where it lands for both new and retrofit build is better economically for society and the environment than centralised solutions? Evidence, evidence, evidence. Even though it's often emotion that drives changes in law, you still need the evidence first. And just to build on what Tom has already said about the World Water Congress, there are 3 UK fora there, and one is on valuing resources, and half of that forum is all about rainwater management. And I'm getting people from overseas to come and tell the UK how it's done. Let me summarise. There is no silver bullet. We need a strategy that's based on various pillars and following the 2 simple principles of rainwater management. My final slide, I'm going to leave to Janet and John, who in the 1940s and 50s were an educational resource that spoke in very simple language to educate the children of the day. And Janet and John say to each other, oh, that's odd, my slide's not going forwards. I'm going to have to read it because it's my last slide is not going forward. It says, my goodness me, John, we've sorted water scarcity and storm overflows and reduced our carbon footprint. To which John replies, Janet, that's because you and me are good at managing rain where it lands. Simples. Thank you very much.
Matt, thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure everybody appreciated that focused, both broad and deep perspective. And I'm sure that nobody can doubt your passion for this topic. And I would be most surprised if any of our audience are not persuaded how important it really is. I think it's extraordinarily important. Anyway, before we get into philosophy from me, which is probably not what people want to hear, I would like to open things up for questions, and we have a couple of them, and I'll just pick them off one by one. If you are minded to, folks, I'll pick you out individually, ask you to put your microphone on, and you can ask, and camera, and you can ask Matt your question direct. So the first one that's come in is from Tracy Viney. Tracy, if you'd like to, I'm happy to read your question, but equally, if you'd like to switch on your mic and ask it yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, can you hear me, Matt?
No problem. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Excellent. I'm really concerned about the fact that we've got loads and loads of rain coming down. And as you say, we need to capture and use it more locally, all 100% on that. But I also think that the water companies need to do more to capture it and use it as a resource for fixing our drinking water problems. And so my question really is about how do we incentivize water companies to capture more winter rainwater to store for drier summers in aquifers and reservoirs. I know there are issues with storage, but if we could do that, then there would be more water available. We wouldn't necessarily need to draw our aquifers down so quickly. You could build those locally to where, you know, we've got loads of flooding and things at the moment, and store that water. And so it's really about, my question is, how do we incentivize water companies to do that? Because at the moment we seem to be incentivizing them to build big infrastructure. In Hampshire, we're building effluent recycling 40 kilometres away from where the water's needed. So then you need massive pipelines. It's a £1.2 billion project with costs spiralling. And if we just, you know, moved abstractions to the tidal limit, captured more of that water at the tidal limit, so it doesn't have an adverse environmental impact. It protects 12 kilometres of the River Itchen. And instead we take that water in the winter and store it in aquifers of what we've got loads of in the southeast, especially around Winchester. It just seems a no-brainer to me, but nobody's looking at it.
Okay, well, a lot of people are looking at it. Just to reassure you, the aquifers at the moment are full, and full to ground level. What do I mean? A lot of especially the kind of chalk areas in the south of England are very full. But I totally get what you're saying. So in terms of building big grey reservoirs, there's an awful lot going on there, and as you've just alluded to, there's a lot of transfer schemes as well. You might be talking about aquifer storage recharge, which has been proven in a few places, but the strategic resource options, which is this nationwide approach to trying to tackle this problem from a centralized solution point of view, is very much underway, and there are billions of pounds being ploughed into that at the moment. So I think just to reassure you, there is an awful lot of work going on in that space. My concern with anything that is centralized is, as you've already mentioned, alluded to, is the cost of moving it to where it's needed. And so whilst other people are focusing on the strategic resource options, I'm focused on the local solutions at sort of property level or community level. So yeah, you're right to ask the question, but I would say there's more focus on what you're talking about than what I'm talking about, because it's easier for people to get their head around big solutions. I'm talking about lots of little solutions. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that one, Matt, and thank you, Tracy. I mean, I think just a quick comment. I don't know if this is a helpful sort of way of reframing these things, but the first principle of a circular economy strategy is to intercept at source or eliminate at source. And I don't know whether, because circular economy is a new buzzword that people are interested in clinging to, and it might be more attractive, whether it's worth reframing this to some extent or joining the bandwagon. That's a comment really, rather than the start of a conversation. The next question, Isabel Lewin, if you're online and you'd like to ask your question because it relates to what we're just talking about. Otherwise, I'm happy to read out your question for you.
No, I'm happy to ask a question. So as private households, where is it possible for water companies to incentivize a private household to separate water from their roof and providing rain butts or things like that in their gardens? Because that would be an easy investment for the water company for a longer kind of benefit. At the moment, that cost might deter some of the private household to actually buy that rainwater harvesting.
Yeah, so that's what you've struck on exactly the problem. Water is very cheap. To make a change to how much water you use is expensive and doesn't pay for itself. And so what we're seeing now is this realization that we've got to start, rather than spending all the money on centralized solutions, is start spending the money on decentralized solutions and go down that sort of grant process. So what you'll be seeing at the moment is a lot of grant money being aimed at non-households, so businesses. So water companies are starting with kind of the big users and saying, hey, we're going to help you reduce your water demand and we're going to give you some money for it. So it's starting already. It all around the country, all water companies are doing this. Then you'll start seeing it come down towards property level, and something that Wessex is already kind of doing in a very small scale at property level. But yes, you do need to have either a grant money to do it, or the water company come and do it for you. And I think what you'll see is, as people grasp the long-term benefits of managing that rain at property level, you'll start to see more in this space. The other thing that's lacking is the resource to do it. If you wanted someone to come to your property and do it, who would you ask? Because there isn't really. So if you're an entrepreneur out there and you want to go into business, become a rainwater management business, because pretty soon there's going to be an unlocking of that cash flow that's going to go down to these businesses that don't exist to tackle property level rainwater management. That's my prophecy for the presentation. If I had, I guess, more skills at entrepreneurship, I'd probably do that. It's probably a little bit early to do that, but what I'm saying is it is coming. So it's a good question. We are seeing that change, and hopefully the floodgates probably the wrong word.
The opposite of it.
Yeah, hopefully there'll be a lot more focus on this going forward.
Excellent. That's great news. Thanks.
Thanks very much. So the next question, which again I think conveniently follows from that, Christine Lacing. Christine, again, if you're able to, if you kindly put on your microphone and ask your question for Matt, that would be great.
Hi. Yeah, hi. I hope you can hear me. I'm coming to you live from France. If the
No, loud and clear.
I apologise. So thank you very much, Tom and Matt, for this brilliant presentation. I think my question is available to read in the chat, but just to carry on the conversation, it was that I wanted to comment sort of on the reflections of the Cunliffe report, and he spoke about the patient investors. And you know what we need to have as a sort of reliable revenue source for this circular economy of maybe using recycled plastics to store this water. And I also like to confess to you all that as we've just built a property and it wasn't financially viable to put in. And also to sacrifice that space, I'm afraid, for the rainwater reuse, which is terrible because my husband has been running a rainwater use business. So it really does need water prices to go up and grants to come along. So my question really was about how can we get traction on this? And really, it's so good that it's been talked about in the House of Commons, but just, you know, the press and the public understanding of the problem is one thing to change. Yeah, so I didn't want to be negative.
No, that's a great question, and welcome to my world. That's what I'm kind of trying to do. And as I said, that's why you need all those pillars. You can't just change legislation and hope everything happens. You can't just change regulation. You've got to do all of this. So that's kind of the space that I'm working in, is to try and show, first of all, you've got to educate people about why it's not happening and why it should be happening, and provide the evidence for that. That was the Buckware project is helping with that. You've got to talk about it. So everyone's got to start talking about the same thing. So rather than talking about dumping raw sewage, which is unhelpful and untrue, we've got to talk about managing rain better where it lands. And you know, I think we've got to remember that the assets we build now will be in place in 60, 70, 80 years' time. It'll be the same things. And our climate will have changed massively. Those early graphs I showed in this presentation are a foretaste of what is coming. You can see the direction of travel. The climate is getting warmer. It's going to get wetter. We're going to get more extreme conditions here in this country. We only need to look at other countries who are further ahead to learn the lesson and got to go flip. We're going to be like them. We need to change now. And that requires leadership. That requires people in policymaker positions to see the future, to understand the future, to understand the direction of travel, and say, we've got to make this happen. If you make it optional, it doesn't happen. So it needs strong leadership. It doesn't need massive technology. This is really simple stuff. It just needs that strategic leadership. So part of my job is really basically to try and educate policymakers to say, you guys have got to make this decision now, because otherwise it's going to cost 10, 12 times as much to unwind it in the future. And, you know, I don't think you need to look too much at the weather and the climate to see how rapidly things are changing. The data is all there. Sorry, Donald Trump, but you're wrong. You know, we can actually see it, and we have to address it now, because this is a future problem. It's a now problem. This could be a worse future problem. So, yeah, if you want to connect with me to find out other things you could do, really happy to give you pointers. But lobby MPs. You know, MP, we're about to build 1.5 million homes and fill every single toilet system with drinking water. Why? You know, we should.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just will add on to that I've just been working in local authority for 12.5 years. So that power of putting information back to your local and national politicians, they really are reactive to it, and it's so important. Yeah. And we do know what we're talking about, so we should be putting more pressure on them. It's just another thing to do, but yes, good reminder. Thanks.
All right, folks. Well, we're getting very close to 12 o'clock. So perhaps I'll just wrap up with a quick question for Matt, and then I'll make some closing comments. I think the dial is shifting. I mean, we were together in London on Wednesday last week at the Economist Water Summit, and a lot of very senior people at board level of very big companies were saying we need to put water front and centre of our thinking in board decisions. And there were property developers and local planners there as well. But I wonder, Matt, obviously we've had Emma Hardy speaking about this in the Commons, and we've got Steve Reed having moved from DEFRA through to housing and local government and planning. Do you think maybe the dominoes are shifting, the stars are aligning, and the opportunity is genuinely opening up?
I'm an optimist, and the answer is yes. I have seen a rapid change in thinking, because this is a change of thinking more than anything else, over the past few years. And I'm confident that if that rate of change of thinking continues, then we will start making some better decisions for how we manage the quantity of water in this country in the not too distant future. And I think I'm pretty close enough to see the changes that are already happening in this space. How long it takes, don't know. Am I going to keep going? Yes, I am. Do I believe in this, that it will work? Yes, I do. So I want others, I'd love as many people on board as possible. We can change how we manage the quantity of water in this nation for good if we shout with a common narrative. And I do fundamentally believe we will.
And I think, again, I totally agree. I've advocated for quite a long time, and people think, oh, it's that crazy academic. But what about the opportunity for water companies to get on the front foot, work with the regulators and shape policy and shape regulatory frameworks to everyone's benefit, rather than wait to be regulated and not like the direction? And I think this is a fantastic example of that forward thinking. And I just perhaps end with an observation. David Shukman on the BBC this morning and through today, you'll see it in the news tonight, is making a lot of noise. He's one of the BBC's environment correspondents. 1 in 9 properties that's been built since 2000, so in the last 5 years or so, is built in an area of flood risk. And if it had been built with rainwater capture mechanisms and SUDs, and not with plastic gardens and grass, then the risk of flooding would have been mitigated at the point of construction. So I'll just finish by saying, Matt, thank you very much indeed. To everybody for joining, thank you very much. The slides and the recording will be available through Institute of Water channels. And I'll just finish before we say thanks to Matt by thanking Heidi. She's been in the job for 3 weeks with the Institute of Water. This is her first webinar, her first public event, and she's done a fantastic job in the background, helping us with the logistics. And thank you to those of you who've put comments in the chats, appreciating Matt's presentation and asking for more. And that's what we hope to deliver. So thank you, everybody, very much. But most particularly, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Melissa.
Should we just hang on for a second?